after having looked at IOPs and DOPs with formal commands as the vehicle through which, in a very long video, we were going to, or we did practice, where do we put IOPs, where do we put DOPs, when do we need them, when do we not. Actually several videos, but one of them over an hour long, but hopefully once and for all, so that you guys could kind of feel more comfortable with IOPs and DOPs than students generally are whenever they get to this level. There's just one more step that we have to take. So if you remember a few videos ago, we had those rules that said things about, that taught us about the placement of IOPs and DOPs. Rule number 1 said object pronouns are attached to the end of affirmative commands. We did that in the last video. Rule number 2 said object pronouns precede negative commands. We did that in the last video. Rule number 3 said object pronouns precede, object pronouns come before conjugated verbs, and we have not tackled that yet, and that's what we're going to do right now. Also, the other rules that we're going to put into place right now, still kind of taking our last set of 4 sentences that we morphed 3 different times and making parallel type sentences up here just in the present tense and in the preterite tense. Another couple of the rules that we're going to put into action are going to be rule number 4 that said whenever you use an IOP and a DOP together, which one always comes first? The IOP always comes before the DOP. And then rule number, whatever it was, 5, or who knows, I think I've lost count. The other rule that I gave you that says whenever you use the IOP, le or les, with any DOP, le or les must change to say. So we're going to see that here. And for the purposes of this video, just remember that it is a continuation of the last video, but I wanted to stop the last video because we're using the verb decir with formal commands to practice IOP and DOP rules and usage and placement. And now we're not using formal commands to practice IOPs and DOPs together. Now we are simply using 2 sentences in the present tense and 2 sentences in the preterite tense. Could I choose any tense under the sun to practice this? Could we do it with the imperfect? Yes, but I just wanted to give you a quick example of some sentences like this in the present tense and in the preterite tense, which everyone should know extremely well by this point, so that you can practice what do IOPs look like in the sentence, where do they go when it's not a command, it's just a regular sentence in the past, so in the preterite or in the present tense. For these sentences, remember, since it's a continuation of our last set of 4 sentences that we switched up 3 different times, we have the verb decir, which means to say or to tell. And we were working with something about, in the other video, tell me the answers, don't tell me the answers, tell her the answers, don't tell her the answers, tell them to her, don't tell them to her, blah, 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 blah. So just remember that las respuestas is the way that you say the answers. If you have watched the video prior to this, you'll see how this is just a continuation of that video. But the one thing to keep in mind is that these are no longer commands. I'm just using IOPs and DOPs with regular sentences. Again, I have chosen to use present tense and preterite tense, but I could be using any tense that you know already to practice this. So the point of this video is just using IOPs and DOPs in sentences that are with conjugated verbs that are not any kind of a command. So we'll start off with the present tense sentences. I've already done them for you because if you can do what we did in our previous video, this should be so extremely easy. So we have this sentence, she tells them to me, meaning when I say she tells them to me, what is the them referring to? She tells them to me. Well, the them is referring to, again, this is not going to make any sense unless you watch the video prior to this, which was commands with IOPs and DOPs, I think is what I titled it. Commands with IOPs and DOPs. This won't make any sense unless you've seen that. So if you're watching this before you watch that one, because you saw how long it was, stop now and go back and watch that one first. So when we have the sentence behind me, she tells them to me. The them is, what does she tell you? The answers. So them and to me and whatever. Let's look at the sentence in English to figure out what are all the components in English and then what do we have to account for and how and where in Spanish. So we have she as the subject or the subject pronoun. That is going to be ella. The tells, I'm working here in the present tense, and we're working with the verb decir, to say or to tell. So when we look at the sentence, we can see the verb dice conjugated up there. Dice is in the present tense, conjugated based off of ella, but then we have a couple of things here in the middle. Why would we have things that are preceding our conjugated verb? Because of rule number 3 from a few videos ago. Again, I'll remind you that if you haven't watched that video, then this video might not make a whole lot of sense, and it would be a good idea to stop and go and watch the video that gave you a review and some rules about IOPs and DOPs. So we have ella, who is she. We have in the present tense, the verb decir, tells, conjugated based off of ella. And what are these things right here? Well, the may is an IOP because the sentence in English says she tells them to me. So I am the recipient. And since I am the recipient, I need to be modified by an indirect object pronoun, an IOP. And the only appropriate IOP for she tells them to me would be may. Remember that our IOP options are me, te, le, nos, les. And then, what is this right here? What is this las referring to? It's referring to las respuestas. Better yet, it has replaced las respuestas. But what part of speech is it, or what function does it have in the sentence? She tells them to me. Remember, if you watched the prior video, we were talking about people telling other people the answers, las respuestas. When we had that sentence, those commands, whatever, about las respuestas, those were the nouns, also known as the direct objects in their noun form, that were being transferred from one person to another person. But whenever we turn our direct object into a pronoun, it is called a direct object pronoun. In Spanish, when your direct object is, in this case, for example, feminine and plural, your direct object pronoun must be feminine and plural. So what are our direct object pronoun options? From a few videos ago, we'll remember that they are lo, la, los, las. And las is the feminine and plural direct object pronoun. So that's what these things are. This is my IOP and this is my DOP. Then the next question we have to ask ourselves is, what's the placement all about? Why is everything where it is? Because of rule number 3, again, that says whenever you use object pronouns, they're going to precede the conjugated verb. Well, here's our conjugated verb, and so that's why our object pronouns, both our IOP and our DOP, are placed before the conjugated verb. And then one other question to ask ourselves is, why is it may and then the last? Why is it not last and then may, or whatever? And it's because we had another rule that said whenever you use an IOP and a DOP together, the IOP always comes first, or the IOP always comes before the DOP. So that's why we have the IOP coming before the DOP, and both of our object pronouns coming before the conjugated verb because based on the rules that we saw a few videos ago. So if I am talking about, like I say, oh, and I do really, really well on those quizzes because she tells the answers to me, or she tells me the answers, and somebody says, what? And I say, yeah, she tells them to me, or she tells them to me. That them referring to the answers. In Spanish, I would say something like, ella me las dice. Ella me las dice. Then, what if all of a sudden the tables have turned and she doesn't tell me the answers, but I tell her the answers. So I tell them to her. Again, continuation from our last set of examples and our prior very long video. The them referring to what does she tell me? Las respuestas, the answers. So when I say I tell them to her, now we have another thing that's coming into play here. Obviously, yo is because I am the subject. Obviously, tell in the present tense, conjugated based off of yo is digo, D-I-G-O. So if we know where you get the yo, know where you get the digo, the next thing that we probably know how and why it's there or what it is the last, because we just talked about it right here, and it's the same. It is our direct object pronoun that is feminine and plural that has replaced las respuestas, which was our direct object in its noun form. So this is our feminine and plural direct object pronoun. So what is that? If you watched the last video, you already know what this is. Or if you watched the video of this video, you know what this is, because I said something like, whenever you use the indirect object pronoun le or les with any direct object pronoun, so whenever you use the indirect object pronoun le or les with any direct object pronoun, le or les must change to se, S-E. If you're thinking to yourself, okay, well, I see that we're using a direct object pronoun, but I don't see the usage of le or les in here, so why did we change this to se? It's because I have already done it for you. So let me explain. When you look at this sentence, I tell them to her, meaning the answers, I tell them to her all the time. You say to yourself, who is the recipient of them, meaning the answers? Who's the recipient? She is. The third person singular IOP that would modify the recipient of the answers. So I tell them to her, she is the recipient of the answers. The appropriate IOP when we go through our options, me, te, le, nos, les. The right one for her being the recipient is le. But our sentence cannot be yo le las digo because of the rule that says if you use le or les with any DOP, the le in this case would have to change to se. So if you were doing a sentence like this on your own, if you wrote yo le las digo, not only would it be incorrect, but it would not be understood because there's no le las in Spanish. So remember that we never use le or les with any DOP. If we would have to use le or les with any DOP, le and les must change to se. So again, she tells them to me, meaning the answers. Ella me las dice, and nope, now I tell them to her. Yo se las digo, and that's it, because it would have been le, but the rule says that we have to change it to se because we're using it with the DOP. These sentences, these verbs, digo and dice, are in the present tense. So let me look at the preterit just to give you some more examples. I know that there's a glare, so I will make sure that I read everything for you out loud very well and spell anything that might be a little bit tricky. So now I'm in, if you look down here, it says preterito. I'm in the preterite tense, and she told them to me. How did you do so well on that quiz? She told me the answers. What? Yeah, she told them to me. She told them to me. That told would be in the preterite. So there is my conjugation of the verb decir, to say or to tell, in the preterite tense, conjugated based off of she, since the sentence is she told them to me. Dijo, D-I-J-O. D-I-J-O is the preterite of decir, conjugated based off of ella, which is what it says right here. Let me see. There's a glare. Can you see it a little bit better now? I have my hand on a light bulb so you can see that. So hopefully, maybe a little bit. So ella dijo, she told. But then what is this stuff right here? Well, it's a repeat of the same stuff that we saw over here. I didn't change the recipient, so the IOP is going to remain the same. I didn't change the what was told, meaning the them is still we're presenting as the answer. So our DOP is still going to be feminine and plural. The only thing I changed was the tense, so that you can see whether we're in the present tense or the preterite or the imperfect or whatever, just to see the placement of IOPs and DOPs and how they're used in the sentence. So obviously the last is the feminine plural DOP that replaces las respuestas. The me, since the sentence is she told them to me, I'm the recipient. The me is the appropriate IOP, indirect object pronoun, to modify the recipient of them. Why is it in this order? We already talked about it with these sentences over here, but it's in this order because we have a rule that says a few videos ago, whenever you're using an IOP and a DOP together, the IOP always comes before the DOP. So if I wanted to say, she told them to me, and that them referring to the answers in Spanish, las respuestas, my sentence would be, ella me las dijo. Ella me las dijo. Ella me las dijo. And last but not least, we have a sentence over here, kind of like we had over here, but this was the present tense, and this is now the preterite tense. So now I told them to her. I told them to her. Yo, because I am the person doing the telling. Told is the preterite tense. So dije, D-I-J-E, is the preterite of the verb decir, conjugated based off of yo dije. And there's stuff here in the middle. Obviously the last is technically the them, but why is it feminine and plural, direct object pronoun, or DOP? Because we are assuming that we're still talking about what did she tell me or what did I tell her? Las respuestas, the answers. So we have a feminine and plural DOP, and then why is this say? For the same reason that it's say over here, which is when we figure out who the recipient is of the answers, I told them to her, she's the recipient. Le is technically the appropriate IOP that would modify or match the recipient. Her, she is the recipient, le, L-E. But we have that rule, again from a few videos ago, that says you may not ever use the IOP, le, which would be the appropriate one for right here, or les, with any DOP, because le or les will have to change to say. So if you were to do this on your own and you came up with something like, Yo le las dije. Yo le las dije is wrong and it wouldn't be understood because le or les has to change to say when it is used with a direct object pronoun, and here it is used with a feminine plural direct object pronoun. So if I wanted to say I told him to her, I would say yo se las dije. Remember, on this side, we had the preterit tense, and on this side, we had the present tense. So the whole purpose of this video was really just to show you, since we have already seen a review of IOPs and DOPs, what they are, what they mean, when to use them, where do they go, when do we need them, when do we not need them. We use them with formal commands in the long video before this, and this is just to put that third rule that we talked about several videos ago that said object pronouns, so meaning IOPs and DOPs, any kind of object pronouns, precede or come before conjugated verbs. I just wanted you guys to see some example sentences and just two random tenses that I thought you would know pretty well by now, or that you should. Present tense and preterite tense, so that you can see that in any of these examples up here, both the IOP and the DOP come before the conjugated verb in the present tense, preterite tense, whatever tense we might be talking about. And just to reiterate once again, those other two things, which are whenever you use an IOP and a DOP together, the IOP always comes before the DOP, and then that last thing that we saw in this sentence and in this sentence, which was if she, for example, is the recipient and the appropriate IOP would have been les, the rule says you cannot use les or les with any DOP like we had in these sentences, and that the les or les would have to change to say. So this is literally the complete wrap up of every single thing that can happen with IOPs, DOPs, the placement of them, whatever. Remember that when we looked at the formal commands, if we wanted to do the same exact sentences using a different kind of command, all of the rules about IOPs and DOPs would be the same. The only thing that was still left out on the table for us to practice happened to be this stuff, which is using IOPs and DOPs in just regular sentences that are not any kind of a command. It's just present tense or preterite tense, or we could have done any other tense as long as it's not a command. So as you can see, all this object pronoun stuff precedes conjugated verbs. So if you haven't watched all of the videos relevant to, pertinent to, about IOPs and DOPs and pronunciation and accentuation and commands and stuff like that, then please make sure that you watch all of those before watching this one, because you need to know all that stuff for a lot of this to make sense. So this will wrap everything up in a nice little bow. Thank you.